The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is sponsored by Two Fat Lardies, Geek Nation Tours, and by the very generous donations of you, the listener. Thank you to everyone for your continued support. We really appreciate it. Meeples and Miniatures, episode 205. The Epic Show, with hosts Neil Shuck and Mike Hobbs, and guests Ken Whitehurst, Teras Cassidy, and Peter Ramos. Greetings one and all, and welcome to another episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. I'm Neil Shuck, and this, for most of the rest of the show, is about all that you'll hear from me. A bit of a different show today, as primarily we're talking about a Games Workshop product. Now, we don't normally talk about Games Workshop at all, but actually going back 3 years, we had an idea. Well, actually, the Welsh Wizard had an idea about putting together a show of one of his favourite games of all time, which happens to be Epic. Some people may know it as Space Marine, some people may know it as Epic 40,000, but Epic. Now, here we are 3 years later, and all our ducks are finally in a row, and we put it together. And for the most part, Mike is running this along with our guests, and I'm very much playing the sound editor, for want of a better phrase, simply because, well, I won't give the game away, but you'll find out. So, a bit of a different show for you, and also one of the reasons why this preamble is pretty short is that, as far as our weekly shows are concerned, this is quite a long one. As the main part is just over 2 hours. So, what I suggest you do is make sure you've got plenty to do, or at least a very long drink, for the next couple of hours. Because you're in for a treat as Mike and several guests kick back and geek out big time about Games Workshop's mass sci-fi battle game. It's also about how the gaming community can keep a game alive after its publishing company decide it's run its course. So we'll take a quick break, and you've got that to look forward to when we come back.
I must get through to Sergeant Watson's position. Jenkins, cover me!
Sir! Whoa.
Sergeant Watson, bring your men in. Withdraw.
It's all right, sir. We're enjoying ourselves.
What?
Yes, sir. It's these here chain of command rules, sir. We're having great fun.
Chain of command?
That's right, sir. It's a challenging but fun blend of command and control. It gives me the freedom I want to fight the way I want to. Never had so much fun, sir.
And we've cooked you some sausages.
Can't be helped, sir. Me and the lads are staying put.
Chain of command, World War II, platoon level rules from Two Fat Lardies. They really put you in control. And they're even better than sausages.
This is a message from the Cranky Lawyer. Huzzah! Please plan to join us for 3 great days of the best our hobby has to offer. Beautiful tabletops, challenging scenarios, board games, a wonderful variety of gaming-related shopping, and great company. Huzzah! May 19th to the 21st, 2017, South Portland, Maine. Miniatures games, board games, tournaments, vendors, raffle and great company. Join us for 3 days of fun. If you want to learn more about shoutouts, visit our Patreon page. The link is on the website. We'd like to welcome to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. We have almost a cast of thousands. Well, at least a cast of 4 for this very special show. First off, we'd like to welcome back to the show Mr. Ken Whitehurst.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Hello, sir. How you doing?
I'm very well. It's a beautiful afternoon here in Virginia, and glad to be back.
Fantastic to talk to you again. It's been a while since we last chatted, so it's nice to catch up. A man who has been off the show for at least 3 weeks, Mr. Teras, Cassidy.
Hello, sirs. How are you guys?
We're well, thank you. Welcome from Canada.
Thank you. Yeah, I just have a little bit of snow still left, so it's almost gone.
It's making me feel cold already. And we have a brand new guest of the show, Mr. Peter Ramos.
Hello, everyone, and greetings from Middle America here in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
A very warm welcome to the show, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
We're all here at Mr. Hobbs' behest.
Hello.
Mr. Hobbs, would you care to explain why the gang is all here?
Well, this started off with a conversation we had about 3 years ago, actually with Teras.
It was just after we recorded the show with Teras, wasn't it? It was kind of off the back of it, if I remember rightly.
Well, we started talking about Space Marine or Epic. And I said, oh, wouldn't it be great to do a show about Epic? And 3 years later, we're doing a show about Epic. So this is going to be a completely self-indulgent show for me, which I'm really thankful Neil's allowed me to do it. So we're going to talk about an old Games Workshop game that came out in the late 90s that is known as Epic. It has had many versions and additions and name changes and base changes, but it's okay now. I've calmed down after that. So we're going to talk about that, but we're also going to talk about how games don't have to die just because they stop getting produced. So we're going to talk about the community of gaming and how if people get together, they can keep games alive. And then we're going to chat about how this game has influenced other games in the genre and possibly some of ourselves to actually write our own games. So that's what we're going to talk about.
Mr. Hobbs, point of order.
Mm-hmm.
Late 90s.
Late 80s.
I was going to say, what year was Space Marine released, mate?
You're older than you think.
Okay. First blooper. I'm not doing all that again. I'll just leave that bit in.
Fine.
Yes,
but,
late 80s.
Yes. But before we do all that, we would be remiss if we did not do our usual introduction for a new guest. Peter is the first time on the show, so he has to go through the new guest initiation process.
Oh, dear.
Don't worry. It doesn't hurt.
One of us.
Just hold the sleek in your left hand.
Indeed. It's quite painless, honestly. Basically, we'd just like to find out a little bit more about how you got into the wargaming hobby, how you started, and what you've been up to.
Sure. As already mentioned, the full name's Peter Ramos. Those who've known me know that I've moved around a lot, even though now I live in Oklahoma City. In Oklahoma, I've pretty much lived in all the time zones that left, with the exception of the West Coast. I live in the Caribbean, so if you've known me for any period of time, it's kind of hard to keep track of where I'm hanging my hat for the moment. But I've been here in Oklahoma for about 10 years. In real life, I'm actually a physician, a pathologist to be exact, which is something a lot of people find kind of intriguing. How the heck does a pathologist like little 6mm war games? But there you have it. I actually, like probably most people, I was what you call a traditional war gamer. In other words, historical gaming. Back in the early 80s, late 70s, when there was not a lot to do with that. I got into D&D as most people around that time, late 70s, early 80s, and there was quite a long stint that I was involved in role-playing games because there wasn't a lot of variety as far as war games. Then the late 80s come around, and I, by happenstance, walk into a hobby shop. And I remember seeing the Realms of Chaos book. You'll sure remember these books are quite iconic, specifically the one with Nurgle on the cover. I believe that was the second tome of that series of books.
That was Lost in the Dam, wasn't
it? Exactly, which I believe is a very popularly sought after collector's item nowadays. So I saw the book, I read it, and I was instantly hooked on the background. It was something very different from what I was used to. It was very interesting to me. So since 40K kind of precedes Epic by a little bit, I think maybe a year and a half, I started with that. But I always liked the very large scale of wargaming, going back to my historical period. So when I open White Dwarf one day and I see this advertisement for this game called Adeptus Titanicus, and I look at the description, I'm like, wow, those look like little 40K dudes, but you can feel a whole bunch of them. And so basically right then and there, I sold off my entire 40K collection. And so that was the last time I've played the traditional 40K game from Games Workshop. And I basically dumped it pro Epic, and I haven't looked back ever since. So I've been pretty devout to that, even though I like 6mm as a scale. And I'll probably play almost anything in that scale. This has been the go-to game for the last, oh dear, how long has it been there? We're into 29 years. There you go.
That's good going.
It is.
It is, yeah.
One game for 29 years. I don't think I could do that.
Yeah, I'm not much for. I mean, I like different. I'm more like I like different rule sets, but as far as the collection goes, it's been pretty stable, and I guess later on we can get into that. But anybody who knows my username on, which is Primark, let's just say that my collection of Epic figures is worthy of one of the Sons of the Emperor, and let's leave it at that. And that's putting it very mildly.
Yeah, don't worry, you are amongst like-minded folks. Right. Okay. Thanks, Peter. So let's discuss why this wonderful gang of people are here. So Peter Ramos is here because he is the coordinator of NetEpic, which is would you call it a fan-based version of the game? It's basically kept the torch alive, hasn't it, Peter?
Yep. It's we turned our 20th year at the beginning of this year. Our traditional birthday for NetEpic is January 16th, and just to give there's a lot of little tidbits, which I'm really glad to have been invited to do this, because I feel that sometimes a lot of historical stuff gets lost, and this is a nice way to document that, sort of for like posterity. The reason January 16th is the birthday of NetEpic, because that is the first day the NetEpic group of founders, which Teras is a part of, started our chain email group. You got to remember, this is a very long time ago. This precedes a lot of things that we take for granted now, like messaging and groups and Facebook groups and all that. I mean, our group was literally sending emails with about 16 different emails attached to it, so we can all correspond to each other. And that's how NetEpic started. And the very first email to constitute the group was sent out January 16th, 1997.
Wow.
So we are 20 years now.
Yeah. We're going to cover NetEpic quite a lot in a while. So it'd be great to talk about it. We also have Teras on, who is, I think you could be known as a self-confessed Epic fanboy.
Oh, yeah. For me, Epic is by far GW's best best game ever. And actually, I think it might well be my favorite miniature war game ever, to tell you the truth, for sure. Yeah, love it.
Brilliant.
Properly spoken like a true founding member of NetEpic. Anything else is heresy, you'll be executed. I would have to send the Inquisitors to your house.
There'd be really little, though, so that'd be okay.
Yeah, just stamp on them. No, don't stamp on them because they're really worth a fortune these days. And, of course, we have friend of the show, Ken Whitehurst, who is another self-confessed Epic fanboy, and, more importantly, possibly, the author of Polyversal. And Ken's
yes, that's true.
Yes.
And I actually, it's really interesting to hear this because Peter Ramos and Primarch, as I probably know him more often from the Tactical Command board, is one of these people I've sort of followed. I mean, I'm of the generation that was a teenager when the second edition of Space Marine came out and became a big fan of it. And I agree with Teras, I think, and Peter, obviously, that I think Epic's the best game GW ever made. And when I found NetEpic, I was just amazed by it. Sort of gave me the realization that, and we'll talk about this later, I'm sure, that games can survive their original creators as long as there's a community of people who want to keep playing them. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that Teras was one of the founders of it also. I've certainly heard him on other podcasts talking about his travel business, but that's really cool.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Unfortunately, even though I know most of them, if I can see the name, it's been such a long time that I'm unfortunately forgetting who all of them are. Because there's a lot of them that are still active here and there in TalkComs or maybe in some Facebook group, and you can remember that. But it's kind of a shame that as the years go by, and maybe some of them not in as much contact as it used to be, that you kind of forget about them. And what's really sad to me is that I don't have any of those emails due to a hardware failure many, many years ago. That would have been really sweet to have that. So any chance I get to kind of put this in a more permanent fashion, I try to embrace it, because a lot of things just falls through the crack. And there's a lot of funny stories, and obviously we'll get into this a little bit later, of how even this became to be. So it's always good to get a chance to talk about it, and better yet, in this kind of format.
Well, here we go then. This is a big shout out. If there are any of the original NetEpic team listening to this podcast, get in touch with Peter.
You bet. As always, I really I hear from a lot of them from time to time, but I know there's some that's forgotten out there, and they really deserve to be remembered. So just drop me a line, because like I said, I'll remember as soon as I see your name, but I really need to see the name of some of them.
Cool. Right. Well, then let's make a start. So I think the first thing we should need to do is to go through the Games Workshop era of Epic. And I think for that, I'm going to call on Mr. Teras Cassidy to give us a quick rundown of the various versions of Epic that have been released. And then we can discuss why we're calling it Epic when none of the rules are actually called Epic.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll be happy to do that.
Yeah.
Please correct me if I miss anything or I go off on a tangent. So, of course, as Peter mentioned, it started with Adeptus Titanicus, and that released in 1988. I believe there were 6 Warlord Titans, some measuring sticks, dice, of course, and some foam buildings.
Correct.
Adeptus Titanicus was set in the 30K universe, and that was the very beginning of what we call Epic now. Space Marine first edition came out in 1989 as a separate game that could be linked together with Titanicus. There was 2 Space Marine armies, of course, also set in the 30K universe. Marine action. I think there was this is when the plastic roofed buildings came out. And so
the original style, because they had the plastic roof ones in second edition, but the first edition one, the cardboard cutouts were actually different and of better quality than the ones that were later, which were more cookie cutter, and the cardboard was a little bit less in quality.
Right. This one you had to fold the building into a certain pattern and then slap the lid on top, which was the roof, of course.
Right.
So.
The only one with actual foam buildings was the original Adeptus Titanicus with the 6 warlords. All the other ones sported the plastic roof with the cardboard that you had to bend to give the shape.
Cool. Okay, and then we moved on to Space Marine 2nd edition, which was released in '91. That one also came with some orcs and Eldar in the box set, also with some buildings, blast templates, dice, and for the first time, like I said, some orc and Eldar armies. This, however, was set in the 40K universe. So this is when they did the switch from 30 to 40K. It was followed thereafter by a whole bunch of box sets, smaller box sets. These are the box sets that I was talking about, or the regular big box sets that we see from GW that kind of start an era of a new edition or a new game. But they also released smaller box sets to supplement them. Each came with their own cards and templates, and we had the Armies of the Imperium, which is self-explanatory, in 1991. Renegades in 1992, the Orcs and, yes, I'm going to say it, Squat Warlords in 1992, hereby turning the clock back yet again on when we'll see Squats again from GW. Hive War in 1995, and Titan Legions was also a big box set that again was released as a kind of a dual game. You could play it with or without Space Marine,
right.
But really all these things together made up one big, what we call epic, I think, kind of a broad term for all these box sets in one thing. The Titan Legions came with the Imperator, huge Titan.
Yes, and 2 Mega Gargants.
2 Mega Gargants, and some Knights too, right? I think there were some Knights
yes, in there. There were enough for a Knight household, which I believe are 6 models.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And some battle wagons and some terrain.
Yes.
Okay,
that's
cool.
correct.
Cool. Oh yeah, right. There was orc terrain in this, wasn't there?
Yeah, the terrain,
Cardboard.
The buildings in this, because Titan Legions is sort of an expansion and at the same time was an update, because they actually updated the original rules and the buildings changed. They were no longer plastic tops. They were totally cardboard. And there were orc buildings as well as Imperial buildings. And the Imperial buildings look nothing like the previous buildings from the previous rule set. So they're very distinct.
Right. They had more of arches and peaks than the square flat top buildings.
Right. They were full Gothic at that point, I would say. What we would recognize today as the architecture we see normally associated with 40K games.
Right. 40K full Gothic cardboard.
Except they still had color. They were much more colorful than they are now.
Oh, yeah. They're like bluish gray.
Yes. Yeah, it was a little bit bluish gray. Yes.
Great.
That is correct. And
Awesome.
the orc one was kind of yellowish with black.
Yeah, like a sandy yellow.
Right.
Okay, and then in 1997 we saw the final big box of Epic, which was actually called Epic 40K, and this one had 3 rule books, whole bunch of plastic buildings, smaller buildings, more like a ruins. And it came with orcs and Space Marines in this one too, like a larger army of orcs, more infantry and tanks, and of course.
This is where I ask everyone to have a moment of silence as we remember the death of Epic as we knew it.
Yes. Right. Yes, and of course, which we can talk about later.
Sorry, Epic 40K fans, but the truth is the truth.
There aren't any Epic 40K fans, right? To be honest.
Right, and we saw, of course, here a little bit bigger. The miniatures were just a little bit different scale.
Yeah, the scale creep.
Which is arguable. I don't know if that was actually true or not, but arguable.
One thing that game had going for it, though, was that it had all. It didn't have the scope and the breadth of what all the expansions of 2nd edition had, but it did have all the armies in one book, at least very bare bones ones, but at least it had all of them in the book. So it was kind of, in a sense, a truly all-encompassing box set. So besides the figures, that's all you really needed rules wise.
And of course, the big elephant in the room with Epic 40K was the new base size and shape.
I'll get you started with that one.
Well, I think we need to talk about that later. But however,
that's a show all its own.
Yes, that will happen, I'm sure. But the last on the rundown is Epic Armageddon, which was released without a box set. It was just a rule set, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct.
Yeah,
okay.
that's right.
Epic 40K was released in '97. Epic Armageddon was released in 2003. And that's the rundown.
Yeah, and then it moved into the specialist games era around that time, and they put Epic Armageddon as a sort of living rule book on the website, and then slowly it sort of disappeared until it stopped getting produced.
Right, and you actually mentioned to me that Epic Swordwind came out, which was an expansion for Armageddon, and quite honestly, I had no idea that
Yeah,
existed.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I have the book right here with me. So
Yeah.
they actually it's view it in the vein of second edition, where they came out with a box set that expanded a particular force. This was a book that was expanded basically Eldar and Orcs up and beyond what the core rule book had. But it's just a rule book. There's no box set or anything associated with it.
Right. So then that covered what, Eldar and Orcs, right?
Predominantly, yes.
Yep.
Mostly Eldar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So that's a rundown of the Games Workshop era. So it was about sort of 10 years. No, actually a bit more than that, wasn't it? About 15 years in total.
Yeah, you're looking at 88 to 2003.
Yeah. So it had a good run. But the big question, what's our favorite version? So let's go to Ken first.
Well, I mean, there's only one version of Epic that matters, right? And it's the second edition Space Marine box set. If you want to throw in Titan Legions, I'm okay with that. But before and after, before we needed to get to the sweet spot, that was the sweet spot. Epic 40K, as Peter already pointed out, just sort of wrecked the whole thing. And Epic Armageddon is a good game in its own right, but it's not epic, in my opinion.
Well, this is like preaching to the choir here, because we're going to have very similar opinions on this.
I'm guessing yours is the same then, Peter.
Oh, gee. I mean, in retrospect, because I'm going to be very upfront about this, the reason that NetEpic exists is because of Epic 40K. When we get into all the history about it, I'll give you more details and whatnot. But that's the main reason. Now, in retrospect, as you get older, you get a little bit wiser, so they say, and you look at things. It's a good game in its own right. The thing is, it wasn't what you wanted or expected at the moment, and it also kind of emphasized Games Workshop's new philosophy that they were basically genericizing a little bit too much. Second edition, a lot of people may malign the rules per se, or if it's too much detail for the scale and all that kind of stuff, which I understand. But that's kind of the thing, at least that I like Epic, because I like the 40K universe represented in a mechanical form on the tabletop with that set of rules. And unfortunately for me, none of the rule sets after that really caught. They looked a little bit too much like generic rule sets that I can get, which I also like several, and we'll get into that later. But that's not what I want for Games Workshop. When I want to play something different in a different universe, I like these other rule set. But when I play in the Games Workshop universe, in the 40K universe, I wanted a second edition type rule set. I think that encompassed all the quirkiness and all the niceties about it that I liked about it. And the later rule sets just didn't cut it for me.
What about you, Teras?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, I completely agree. I started Adeptus Titanicus, but I think the height of Epic, for me, was when second edition Space Marine meshed with Titan Legions and all the other box sets that were out there. I mean, you had so much more choice. You had loads of races to choose from. Of course, you even had squats oh damn, reset that clock again, and just a very very awesome set of rules, exactly what we wanted. I think it was an interesting time to be in that community though, because I think we were all clamoring for them to kind of not compress the rules, but revamp the rules, and that's where my draw from NetEpic came, is that I wanted a revamping, not a change, but just a kind of a tweaking of the rules, and that's where it really came from. But of course, with the move to Armageddon, I think it was more like the move from Rogue Trader to first edition, or maybe first edition to second edition 40K. Just that oh my god factor that they've dumbed down the game, right? And I don't think that that's really what we were wanting at the time, or not what I wanted anyway. But for me, my favorite, sorry, I'm a little bit long-winded there, but my favorite version of the game is that Space Marine second edition, meshed with Titan Legions, all those other random box sets. That right there was epic to me.
Yeah, I'm going to completely agree with you guys on all those points. It really was second edition for me as well, just because the figures. I mean, I would have loved to have got in more into Epic 40,000, because if you just look at it as a game, there's some nice mechanics in there, but as you say, they just change things too much. And the thing that really got me was with the army list, they sort of changed some of the troop compositions. So whereas before you may have sort of like 3 tanks making up 1 unit, suddenly in Epic 40K they made it like 5 tanks equals 1 unit, or just subtle tweaks like that. So you found that your army, half of it you couldn't use. Yeah, that sort of just, plus the base sizing. Don't get me started on the base sizing at all.
Oh dear Lord, rectangular bases are a thing of the devil. I will never use it. I'd rather eat them than base my figures. If it's not a 20 millimeter square, or I accept a 25 millimeter square, it ain't epic. Period.
Or a round base with a dial in it.
Oh yeah.
Wood
well,
shields.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, we really should talk about the base switch, because we really have to, don't we?
We're kind of picking at it, but
Yeah,
we
that
didn't
is-
go
yeah.
up that scab.
It was
off.
kind of the nail in the coffin in a lot of ways. I think that a lot of, and this is just my perspective from my history of the game, is that the move to switch base sizes. Actually, I played, and we talk about this later, but I played Epic Armageddon at Adepticon just 2 weeks ago, and had a blast. But there was no reason for us to get upset. My opponent had square bases. I had, rectangular bases. I had the old square bases, and they worked fine together. There was no, oh, how is this going to work? But when you're a fan at that time and they switch your armies and your collection doesn't look like an official quote unquote collection anymore, I think that's a big deal. I don't think GW came out and explained until it was too late that no, you can play with whatever bases you want. And of course, we're always, okay, is my collection now valid? And I think that might have been misplayed a little bit by GW.
I mean,
but in reality, I don't think it really mattered.
It just seemed gratuitous, right? I mean, you're not only changing the rules, which in and of itself is a big deal, but you're also changing these bases. And as you stated, from a mechanical point of view, there is no difference. I've played with both, and it really doesn't matter. But if you're changing this rule set and trying to make me go along with it, why are you changing this other thing for no other reason to get people to buy new bases? And you have to remember, you have to put it all in the context of when it's happening historically, right? Things are changing in Games Workshop, the way they market and pitch these things. You can already tell that it stopped being that nice little hobby place we all remember fondly from the oldies and becoming more this corporate entity. And working for one myself, I can tell you right now, this is the kind of thing that they do all the time. So somebody at a meeting said, hey, let's change the bases. Well, why should we do that? Because we'll sell more rectangular bases. There you go. Well, of course, it didn't work out quite that way, but
I think I had a couple of years ago, actually, Eddie Chambers. It was one of my guests at Adepticon on one of my tours. And I think I got a good insight on kind of how that went about, because Andy actually told me that it was a lot of his idea. So I think this time in Epic that in GW history that we're talking about was maybe a transition to more of a corporate type of ladder, but at this time it wasn't quite yet. And so they're dabbling on how to figure things out. And Andy said, I always wanted to change the base shape because I always felt that on the play field that those 5 men in a row looked more like what would happen in a real battle instead of those 5 in a square. And so Andy actually talked to me about that and said that was kind of, and I'm sure the marketing people said, well, yeah, okay, that sounds like a great way. So, but I think we give GW a little bit of a hard time about this change and like changes, but I think that it's often is based on some sort of rules or hobbyist type of decision that the marketing, like you said, Peter, in any corporation, like the marketing people say, "Ooh, that sounds like a great idea to me too." You know what I mean? So I don't know where the actual decision came from, but Andy was quite frank that he always thought that it just looked looked better on the table compared to squares. And I don't know if that's debatable or not, but people don't line up in squares. They do.
That's what I was going to say. One of the criticisms I've heard from a lot of old hands that like Epic is that the new bases look like the Polar Attics. I mean, soldiers in Modern Warfare don't line up they do it more like in the squares of 5 guys. They don't do it exactly that way either. But that's a little bit closer to how, squads kind of move. They don't move 5 guys abreast. Now, I'll tell you this. From what I was told, you mentioned Andy Chambers. Let's put the perspectives from Jervis, perhaps. I think the real reason was because it's easier to paint that way. And it makes a lot of sense because I don't paint myself, but I talk to a lot of painters, and it is a lot easier to paint in a strip. So, and from that perspective, since part of the hobby for Games Workshop is also painting, right? To make it easier for the fans to paint their stuff, and you put it on a strip as opposed to a square, which to paint the middle guy and the back guys is a pain in the butt. But the strip is a lot more accessible in that way. So I've always kind of believed that maybe that was the real reason at the end of the day.
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember when I first saw it, aside from reading the rules, when I saw the bases, I didn't like them because I was used to seeing them in squares. But if I were new to the game, I don't know that it would bother me. And I remember thinking that because the individual 6mm figures had gotten so much more detailed in that iteration of the game, I think putting them in a line allowed GW to show them better, and it is easier to paint them as someone who does paint them. And I also, if you really think they were trying to, if it were somehow a better profit motive to make rectangular bases, that really doesn't make too much sense, because if they had already tooled up a machine to stamp out square bases, they already have that done. And so they could just churn out another 10,000 of them or whatever, rather than make a whole new die for that. Assuming that was how they did it. I'm guessing by then that those square base stamps were probably really old, but I don't know that would really matter from an economic standpoint.
Okay. All right. Mr. Shook, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, just check you hadn't fallen asleep. So
no, I hadn't. No, I hadn't fallen asleep. I was busy crying in a corner because Teras keeps mentioning squats.
Yeah. So, did you ever actually own any Epic? Have you ever actually played it?
Well, owning and playing are two different things.
Sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, thanks for that. I owned an awful lot of it. I struggled to find an opponent, funnily enough, where I was. But I love the idea of it. I bought in I think I fully committed at the point where Titan Legions came out. Because
timing is everything for you, isn't it?
That was a good time. Yeah.
Well, I think second edition I was kind of looking at it as second edition and what have you, and very, very tempted, but I was busy buying 40k at the time. And then Titan Legions came out and thought, this is that. I thought, that huge Titan was just so cool. And then I did have, what's the phrase, a bit of a splurge. So I owned. At one point I did own a fair few armies, but unfortunately I never really got to play it. Basically because I didn't know anybody else who played the game. I had a very nice model collection for a while, and then somebody else had my model collection. Although I must admit, I don't remember ever selling that huge Titan, so I don't know if that's still sat in my loft somewhere. That'd be interesting.
That'd be fun. Well, you brought us on to, before we go into life after Games Workshop, let's do the self-indulgent question. How many armies do we own, do we think? And have we all got any unpainted figures left for Epic? Considering it's been out of production for about 20 years. Yep. So where should we start? Let's start with Peter.
Oh, now they're going to make everybody feel bad.
Yeah, that's like starting at Everest.
Yeah, everything and nothing. Yeah.
Well, I own everything. No, that's not a slip of speech, and that's not an exaggeration. I own every single thing Epic has ever made, going back as far as you care to go. Now, if you want to know how much it is, conservatively, I am at least 1 million points. No, that's not a typo. No, that's not an exaggeration. I'm well over 1 million points, by the way. I'm just saying 1 million because that's probably the last time I counted.
Is that only one army?
Well, my one army Imperial Guard is about 250k, but that probably is inaccurate because I haven't. Let's put it this way: I have. If you go to TACCOMs and you click on my under my SIG, I have a couple of links there. That's one called the Primarch load, and that's where all it's documented. The last time I did inventory, yes, I have to do inventory to determine how much stuff I have. All the armies are there.
Can I just interrupt for a second? On TACCOMs, by the way, I'm Tertius, Tertius, but when the last time the Primarch uploaded the Primarch loan to the thing, I openly wept when I looked at the pictures.
Yes, I am the guy that other guys tell their wives and say, "Look, honey, I'm not as bad as this dude."
Thank God for him.
Yeah. So as I tell everybody, I'm like, yo, all you got to do is the next time your significant other whines and complains on how much you spend on your hobby, you just show them a link of the Primarch load and they will leave you alone forever and ever and ever. Just to give people idea of the scope, it's well over 300 Titans right now. Probably it's probably more than 500.
I've got 6.
I've got a dozen at least, but I thought
I think I have more than 300 knights of all types. Just to give you ideas, right? You know, like a certain pieces. Oh, the Capital Imperialis. Oh my God, that sells for so much on eBay. I have 12, 14, 15, 16, something like that. I forget how many there are. I even have some of them undone, in the original blister pack somewhere laying around. So yeah, it's quite a lot. And if you thought that's nuts, I'm going to go one further. Although none of this is revealed, and I'm not really talking much about this until it gets painted and done. But I am actually in the midst of a project, a very big project. Where I am basically replacing the Primarch load with a lot of custom-made figs from sculptors and people that I've hired to basically upgrade the collection. So what's in those pictures is no longer how much it is. And what's in the pictures is actually very small compared to what I actually am cooking at this moment. I'm still in what I call the accumulation phase, which started in 2013. And I hope it will end in 2018. And then the painting phase will probably take the next 15 to 20 years. So yes, as they come out, I will share them with everyone.
Is your goal to recreate one for one the entire military of the Imperium of Mankind?
Yes. That is a yes. And I'm not even going to get into, once I finish all that, I'm going to go into 30K and do all the Space Marine legions.
Oh, bless you.
On a one for one basis. See, I hate count as. That's how come I don't like Epic.
I agree.
I want to see, WYSIWYG. I want to see is what you get one-on-one, and that's the way. So there's no count as in my collection. If I want something, I'm going to get somebody to do it, or I'll convert it or whatever, but I don't like saying, hey, look at this little fig. This counts as something else. No, my tongue would fall off, should shrivel and die if I ever said that.
Right. Who wants to follow Peter? I don't know, inadequate.
Yeah, I don't even know why I'm on this show now. There's no. I have nothing to add. That's extraordinary.
Wow.
I'm happy to follow him. But maybe Teras should. He's certainly.
No. I go ahead, Ken. You're talking. Give her.
Well, let's see. I have finally. I mean, I started collecting when I was 16 years old. I got Space Marine 2nd Edition box set for my 16th birthday. I'm now 40. I, about 3 or 4 years ago, finally completed what I thought was everything. I have everything there is for 2nd edition. I have many copies of most of those things, but not in the realm of what Peter's talking about, because that's way beyond my ability. And most of it I got because I fortunately ran into someone who used to work for GW Mail Order here in the United States and was having some problems in his life, and basically sold off his collection of just bags of lead that they gave him at work. And it happened to have all of the pieces that came out towards the end of the 2nd edition run, including there were prototype Eldar vehicles that weren't released, or if they were only released by mail order and very few people had them. So I have all of that. I do not have there's a really rare Sci-Titan from the 1st edition. I don't have one of those.
I have 16.
Well, maybe we should talk. Maybe you can part with one. But I have pretty much everything else. And as far as points go, I have nowhere near what Peter's talking about, but it's probably north of 15 to 20,000 per each available army. So enough. I mean, my goal was to basically, for every card that came in one of those expansion sets, army cards, the Orc and Squad Warlords, and was to have one model for every single one of those cards, so that any combination of cards I could pull to make an army, I would have the models for. So that's about where I am now, and I'm calling it quits there, I think, until the next edition comes out.
Go on, Teras, your turn.
Wow, I feel castrated.
Yes.
I believe my balls are on the floor right now, but which is surprising because I thought I had quite large collections. I think I stuck to 3 to start with. I have Orcs and Space Marine, but my Epic army was always Eldar, so I think I have just over 100,000, maybe of Eldar, somewhere around there, maybe just a little bit less of 100 or above. But I only stick to those 2. I was starting when I was just at the end of my stint. I was starting to paint a highly detailed force of Sons of Horus, so including like plague rhinos with tubes coming out of it and super detailed. Anyway, at 6mm. So I was kind of really a very strong hobbyist at that. Not to say that I was a good hobbyist. I was just really into hobbying at that time. So when I started to kind of fade out a bit, Sons of Horus were my last ones. I always loved painting the knights. I think I painted a squad of knights for my buddy. That was also my main epic player. But unpainted, I have the Nids, and Neil, this is for you. I also had some squats. So had that, and I just went through because I went to this little gaming event at Adepticon and played. I had to pull all my stuff out, and it was a joy. I pulled out. It was in the old box, several boxes, and I pulled them out, and even the tissue paper had started to fall apart. So I have quite an extensive collection, and all painted except a little bit, like I said, of knits and spots.
That's good.
Notice how he said all painted. I did not say that.
Right. Well, I mean, for me, I played up to about 95. So I played seriously for about 7 years and collected seriously. But then they went to boxes, and I didn't really play for about 10 years. It was only over the last sort of 5 years I started looking at NetEpic, and and I dug out the armies. But I've still got my original Dark Angels. So I've got the complete chapter, which I was really proud of until I spoke to Peter.
By the way, you do qualify for junior Primarch status if you have at least 100K combined.
Oh yeah.
So don't feel bad. Only if you qualify for that.
One of the lesser Primarchs, though, not first founder.
yeah. One of the gingerhead stepchildren Primarchs. Yeah.
a chaos Primarch. Maybe.
Yeah. So yeah, I've got my Dark Age. So I've got the entire chapter. I think other than a couple of stands. And I got some space wolves and some ultramarines as support for them, like small forces. Imperial Guard was my biggest army, and I probably got about 30,000 points of Imperial Guard. It's 200 or 300 standard infantry plus lots and lots of tanks and stuff. I did collect Orc and Squats, and I've still got those from back in the day. So probably about 10,000, 15,000 points worth of each of those, I'd lost over the years. I've lost my Eldar and my Chaos armies. And I also lost a load of my Titans. So I have recently got myself a new Eldar army. I thought I'm going to do it. And I actually bought one off eBay and then spent about 2 months just putting it back up again and repainting it and adding to it. So, yeah, I sort of look at Chaos and think I should do Chaos, but I also look at some of the new proxy figures which have been coming out and think they'd be quite nice. I fancy doing a Mechanicus army, so that might happen later this year. Unpainted, mostly Titans. I got about 20 Titans to paint and some squat stuff. So it's a good size army as far as I'm concerned, but I feel very inadequate at the moment. But I have enough to play our game, which is all that matters. Right. Okay, so we've sort of covered the Games Workshop era of NetEpic, but let's get on to the main discussion, which is we've seen quite a lot that people play games whilst they're in vogue. The cult of shiny is always out there, and I'm a huge person for jumping out to games which just come out and playing them, or at least buying some figures for them. But there are some games which do exist after the games go out of production, and Epic is one of those. And the reason that it's survived over the last 20 years is because of NetEpic, which we've discussed. So NetEpic is a fan-based, I'm going to say, version of the game. It's taken the second edition rules and it's changed some of the mechanics to make them a bit more interesting. It's kept them updated with the new armies that have been coming out from Games Workshop. And we are lucky enough to have Peter Ramos and Teras Cassidy, who were there right at the beginning. So, gentlemen, would you like to give us a quick rundown of how NetEpic came about, how you got together, what your aims were, and so forth for this project?
Well, this is where I get to tell an interesting story that not a lot of people know about that have to do with how all this started. I don't remember, Teras, if you were involved. I kind of think it was, but you'll let me know if you were. What not a lot of people know is that we had somebody on the inside that was testing Epic 40K who was being naughty and violating his NDA. And if you remember messaging when it was in its infancy, anybody remember IRQ? I think it was called. It's like right. Yeah. I mean, ICQ. There you go. So this gentleman, which I have to tell you, I'm drawing a blank on who he was. Well, he was on the back then. Games Workshop actually had people play testing their games. Miracles of Miracles, right? So this person was basically feeding us what the game was to be before it got there. And at that time, what we were hearing was not encouraging. I'm talking purely mechanics wise, because we're talking, what the changes were, and it was very obvious even at that very early stage that things were changing a lot. And this was not, as was mentioned, and it's very true. The community was in more like a revamping. It was getting a little bit cumbersome because they were adding too many rules to second edition without really testing them. So a lot of things were either overpowered, underpowered, or causing conflict. So we were looking for a more cleaner, unified version of those rules. So when we started to find out, this select group of people with a little bit of inside information, that things were not only not being revamped, but basically rebuilt from the ground up. Well, there was a lot of concerns there. So you could say that the kernel, the little spark that started NetEpic, started even before, because Epic 40K would not release until March of 1997. And what I'm talking about is like late 1996, October, November, December. So that's why the foundation of NetEpic precedes the release of Epic 40K, because you're going like, if you know the timeline, you're going to, but wait a minute, how can you make a reactionary movement against a game that's not even out there? And you would be surprised how many people have not asked that because they don't remember the timeline. But yes, NetEpic was founded 3 months before Epic 40K hit the market. And the reason for that is simple, because those of us that were in that group seemed to were on this little ICQ group that were getting told basically what the game was before it came out. So when it came out, it was not a surprise for us. We already knew what was coming. So basically we decided early on, around Christmas time, New Year's, that, hey, we don't like how this sounds. So since we like second edition so much, why don't we do what we wanted them to do? And the goal was simply put, hey, we know what changes need to be done because we've played this game a lot, and have discussed it. And back then, this was the Epic Space Marine group on the Yahoo group site. And actually, the Epic Space Marine group even preceded the Yahoo website group space. I forget what the original format was, but it wasn't Yahoo because it didn't exist around that time. And a lot of us already knew what we wanted to change, what we wanted to add, what we wanted to, basically swap around. So from that Epic Space Marine group, we drew several people. I know it was at least a dozen, but it could have been as many as 16 people, Teras being one of them, that we all thought the same. So we just came up with that idea. That the name NetEpic was that I came up with because since we were talking on the internet, right, back then, which was still relatively new, right, 1997, 1996, and it says, well, since we're talking on the internet, well, let's just call it NetEpic to make it. I had no idea the name would stick, but it did. So the goal was really simple. We're going to preserve this game that we like. We're going to make the changes, and to avoid, and this is very important because this is something we get asked a lot. Why hasn't Games Workshop quacked down on NetEpic? Because we know they're very vigorous in protecting their IP. And the reason is simple, because I've actually asked legal this over the years. And the reason we're okay is that we avoid 3 simple things. Number 1, no copy paste. NetEpic is written in our own words, or if you go to the original version, my own words. 2, we use no graphics whatsoever from Games Workshop, which is a big no-no. So all graphics you see in our rule books are made by people and contributors and fans. And 3, we have a nice big disclaimer in all our books saying that it's not intended as any challenge to their copyright or whatnot. So that's why we have been able to endure not being shut down by Games Workshop, because we have respected their 3 key rules. And I'll leave it there, see what Teras remembers, because I'm really curious of what he remembers.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, that is a new story to me. I didn't even know that, to tell you the truth. So that's awesome. I came in just a little bit after, not when you guys were right founding, just after you founded though, and I had made a switch from Vancouver to my town that I'm living in now in Hinton. And I was actually without gamers, without any gaming friends. in a new town. So I needed a input, and I loved Epic, and I found out that you guys were thinking about doing the revamping of the rules, and this is just, I think it must have came just after that, because it was we were at the stage of you guys were saying, okay, how are we going to proceed? And that's where I kind of hopped in. One thing for sure, Peter, was the advent of the internet. I mean, I think I still remember modem back then. It was a really cool time to be involved in such a project, because there was kind of nothing like that I've ever done before at that time. I had my first international internet friend. I forget his name. Maybe you remember, Peter, but he was from Turkey. All of us were and this was an international effort.
That's correct. We had people from all over the globe.
And literally all over the globe. It wasn't just people from the UK or the United States. It was like from everywhere. Like I said, we had one guy was from Turkey. So it was a great, cool challenge. And as Peter mentioned earlier, it was basically a chain email. So it would go from person to person and person. Everybody would comment, I think, in a different color. And then as it got more and more involved, Peter would edit it and then resend the discussion out. And we had a great, I mean, I used to anticipate these emails because it gave me a challenge. I mean, luckily I was not working for anybody. I had my own business, but it took me away from my own business a lot, actually, because I just loved it so much. So it was a great time to be involved in that type of group. And for me, the goal was to make the game exactly how I wanted it. I thought that all it needed to do is clean up some things. And then it's funny, though, once you start to clean up one thing, then other things arise. Isn't that right, Peter?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the law of unintended consequences, because you have a group of people, they all love the game, but usually people have a specific favorite, right? Oh, I'm a Space Wolf player, or I'm an Eldar player, an Arc player. My particular job, since I play all of them, since my collection was so large, I actually had, and a little tidbit that a lot of people don't know is I used to be a hobby store owner before I went into medicine. So I actually got to sell Epic. That's one of the reasons why I got so much of it in the heyday of first edition and when second edition started. So I had a good grasp on how all the armies function. So I got all the input from everybody, but I always tried to keep an eye that, no army got, favoritism over the other. So they all could be as balanced as it can be and as competitive as it can be. But it was nice to see everybody was very passionate about it. Everybody, defended their own army, and these points, especially Eldar players, felt they were getting picked on because in second edition, Eldars were considered kind of like the cheesy, easy choice. And they had some mechanical things that favored them a little bit too much. So when we tried to dial them back, there was a lot of pushback, but everything was very, very well laid out. I don't remember much in the way of flame wars. Maybe my memory is being a little bit selective, but we were pretty a close knit group, and we got a lot done. And I believe, if I'm correct, if Epic 40K got released in March of '97, we had our first version of NetEpic by either May or June of that same year. And I have a print copy of all of those. Unfortunately, of the very early ones, I no longer have the actual digital format of those. But just to give you an idea, the first format was done in Word. No PDF, people, just a Word document. And we would edit that, and we would send it around, and it'd get edited, and that's what the final version was when it came out. It was actually very thin compared to what the more recent versions are.
Oh, I was just going to say that it really was a working group. I think that we all really enjoyed each other's company, but I think that there was a passion to really get in and do something about what we loved, the hobby that we loved. So it very much was a working group for sure.
Yeah. So at the moment, so I mean, we're 20 years down in the NetEpic project, and we're up to I think 5th edition of NetEpic is the sort of current version. But you've released what is known as NetEpic Gold, which was the attempt to turn a sort of basic sort of Word PDF document into a sort of glossy looking rule book.
Mm-hmm.
And that came out, what, 5-6 years ago?
Yeah, actually, that is what I call the last great revision of NetEpic, which actually took close to a decade to do. Now, most of by this time, the Yahoo groups existed, and I don't want to paint an overly rosy picture because there was sort of a schism in the Epic community, you know, those who liked Epic 40K and those who still file 2nd edition in NetEpic. And in fact, those of us that left the group actually abandoned that original mailing group because, you know, things were getting a little bit testy. So, and we wanted to do our project and we really didn't. And quite frankly, we were told to leave the list because some people didn't find it fun for us to basically be developing NetEpic on the old group because we were hogging up too much bandwidth, basically. And anybody who's been on an NetEpic revision and back in the old Yahoo groups knows that when we do a revision, the output is so huge. I mean, I can go back because the old Epic group is still on the Yahoo groups, even though it's not used all that often. And I can see, you know, the archives of back then. I mean, we had many months with 1,300, 1,400, 1,500 posts a month at the height of the revision. So NetEpic Gold represents the last great one. That would represent version 5. We've had 5 revisions that would represent the last one. But one thing that stuck out to us, but the feedback of the many people over the years was, as nice as the rules were, it still was just either a Word document or a PDF document. There's a certain intrinsic value towards the presentation in any rule set. It goes beyond just the mechanical stuff or the utility thing. It's like everybody just likes when they put out a rule book, you got a nice, colorful looking thing, just like anything Gary's Workshop would produce. So my goal as far back as probably revision 3, and that's going back at least 17, 18 years, because since the first 3 revisions came in quick succession, 4 and 5 took a much longer time. I wanted to do that, but obviously I don't have the skills to do that. I'm not a graphic layout person. I don't know how to use Adobe Illustrator or any of these kind of things. But that's the great thing about NetEpic, and it's the community. And I would be remiss if I did not thank the many people who have contributed to this project over the years, especially our web people, our webmasters. The current one being Mr. Tom Webb from the UK, who's been our. There's no net without an internet present. There's no NetEpic without it. So without people who stepped up and maintained the actual websites where we have made the rules continuously available for free to all who care to download it, without that person, and before him was just one of those historical tidbit things. The original webmaster for NetEpic, his name is Simon Dodds from Australia. Just to give you an idea of how wide the community was, and it spanned literally all continents. And wow. Then, I used to call him Koala Man, right, for the obvious reasons, because he's from Australia. So he was our original guy, and without him, there would be no NetEpic, because the only other way to distribute this stuff back then was literally upon request, and that would have been highly inefficient. So having a web presence where people can download this stuff made it huge. And after Simon Dodd stepped down, and then we had Tom Webb. I mean, Tom Webb is now 35, 36 years old. I known him since he was 15. So it's one of those weird things where I know what he looks like now because of Facebook and other things, but I've worked very intimately with a person for so many years, and in the old internet, I didn't even know the sound of his voice. So I know Tom likes to listen to these podcasts. So hey, Tom, you're number one, and without you, there's no NetEpic. But it doesn't stop there. There's a whole bunch of other people, and one other name I wanted to give thanks to is Christian Salling. He is from Denmark. He is the man responsible for the graphic layout of NetEpic Gold. So if you like what you see there, that is the gentleman you need to thank, because he's the one at my behest put all that together and have that nice glossy edition you see now. There's a ton of other people, because there's little stories in there that came from different people. And there's another gentleman whose name I'm drawing a blank, and I'm going to shoot myself for not remember, who did most of the graphic kind of little cartoony style that you see in there. But there's a lot of people put their hands on this. As a matter of fact, I'm the least person that did anything for that, because I can't do any of those things. The only thing I can do is just put it all together and make sure it gets available. So like I always say in all my prefaces from every single revision we do, without you guys, there is no NetEpic. And once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much, because we would not be here 20 years later going strong if it wasn't for your support. Thanks.
Well said, sir. Right. So, NetEpic Gold, the rulebook, as Peter said, is available free. You can download it, and we will be giving lots of links for this. But we've also got army lists, and the army lists cover, and each of the army lists is a book in itself with full background and lots of information. But they're all in there. You know, we've got the Marines, we've got the Orcs, we've got the Chaos, Eldar, System of Battle, Imperial Guard, Mechanicus, the Slan are in there, and Necrons. We got Squats, Tau, Tyranids. You name it. Any army has been in 40k. There is an army book in NetEpic. You know, so it's a fully encompassing game. But one of the things that I was really interested in, because I've just gone back and I've revisited the game, and I've had a couple of games in NetEpic, and the thing I've noticed is there were some changes made to the second edition rules. Now, some people might say that's heresy, but I think it's made the game actually play better. So, who came up with the idea of making these tweaks to, you know, to the second edition rules, and how easy was it to get that push through?
Well, there's one thing I always like to tell people, because they say, oh, you coordinated the game. Obviously, you probably got in everything that you wanted to get in there. Well, that's false. As a matter of fact, there is very little of my ideas in there. Why? Because I tend to be a little bit too extreme. And sometimes when I want to revise something, it's basically I want to just break it down to nothing and build it up from scratch. And that's how come they send me off sometimes to do my own projects like Heresy and whatnot. Most of the changes there are by consensus. So NetEpic represents basically a consensus opinion. And as Teras can remember, we vote in NetEpic. It's very democratic. So at the end of the day, there's X idea, and we see what the public has to say. You know, if you're a NetEpic fan, weigh in and tell me what you want. And sometimes I personally may not like that particular thing, but hey, the group wanted it, and that's how it goes in. It's a lot less contentious than it sounds, because there's a lot of discussion to go in, and we usually get that happy medium and that compromise most of the time. Go ahead, Teras, you want to jump in?
Yeah, by all means. I mean, this is for the rules. The main rules is where we started. And that was the thing of beauty. So just think about when you're either hanging out with your friends live, or if you ever do this, if you have intellectual or philosophical debates via email with your friends. I mean, that's really what NetEpic was all about. And NetEpic was this huge a bunch of guys getting together and saying, what do you love about this rule? What do you think is bad about this particular rule? This rule set, what are the rules that need to be changed to make Epic better, and we then narrow it down to a certain rule, and then we would discuss it, and the rules would get heated for sure, but I mean the discussions would get heated for sure, but really it was more like a philosophical debate, and eventually it just got narrowed down, just like as such discussions usually happen. There usually comes down to this gray area that is the best, and I think that that's why the rules shine, is because the you had a whole bunch of people discussing this, always moving to this gray area where it's not the most contentious thing, but it's also not the least contentious thing either. So it was a thing of beauty to be involved with, but also that's basically where we started. And then we moved on to each and every race. And then, so we did all the major races first. And then, of course, we moved on to the new races that you see there. I was, of course, really, really involved in Eldar and Chaos, because those ones were, Eldar had always been my favorite. And Chaos is what I was, as I mentioned earlier, what I had been interested in. But, really, I did a lot of work on the Slan and the Crons. So those ones were even more exciting because there would be a lead, and for instance, I was the lead on the Slan, and I would say, okay, well, what about this idea? And then there'd just be this huge discussion, and then it would get fiddled down, and we're like, oh, okay, no, this is the way the rule is going to go. This is after a vote. This is how we would do it. But that time to be able to create something within Epic's fluff was exciting because no one had really done that before. So that was a really exciting time too.
So going to Mike's question that you said, why isn't it considered heresy? I'll tell you why. Because we cheated. And this is how we cheated. A lot of those changes that you notice in there, they are from Epic, but first edition Epic, not second edition. First edition Epic has a lot of good design choices in it. The problem was that that rule set never reached completion because it's basically like a bare bones thing because they started adding a lot of stuff in White Dwarf and it got messy. The biggest complaint you can do for first edition is that it's not integrated like second edition. There's too many moving parts. A lot of the mechanics don't mesh well, but they did make some design choices that were pretty darn good. And certain things that they eliminated from first edition, we tried to bring back into second edition. So all those little knickknacks you see there, for example, the alternating movement sequence, trying to make Titans a lot more durable, all that kind of stuff. That's not sheer happenstance. That's stuff people remembered from the first edition that they liked better from first edition than second edition. So instead of just making up stuff, which, we did anyway, but that was more in the army construction. But for the core mechanic, most of what we added were basically modified, ported mechanics from first edition. And that's why they were well received. And more importantly, that's how come they worked well. So basically, don't give us a lot of credit. We just stole from first edition.
And then debated the crap out of it.
Yeah. It's all when you mention it, because I started playing first edition. That was the first box I actually bought. But yeah, now you mention it, yeah, it was in there. Like that. Over the years, I've kind of forgotten that. Before we move on to sort of the influence of the game, I think we should also give a bit of a shout out to another sort of fan-based project which is going on, which is the Epic Armageddon, or the NetEpic Armageddon list. So Epic Armageddon, as we know, is the final version that Games Workshop came up with, and I sort of describe it as being a bit sort of Epic light, because it's sort of, well, for me, it seems to be trying to take a mass battle game and make it a small mass battle game, because the armies just seem to be smaller, and I want to play big armies. But it's it's still being played quite a lot, and there is a group of people who are keeping the flame alive with that, with fan supplements being created to cover the other armies and stuff. So has anyone here actually played Epic Armageddon, or the NetEpic version of it, the NetEpic Armageddon version of of the game?
Well, I'll speak up. I had the honor to play with the guys from Adeptus Titanicus at Adepticon, and I have to say that Epic Armageddon, I think there still is a worldwide group behind it, enthusiasts behind it. These guys were a New England area. Dave Susko was able to refresher game with me. I event with all my old miniature happy to play Epic. Yet it was Armageddon, and I had a few of the game. This game, when it really, I have to admit, heresy also. But it was great to be able to play in a big setting like Decepticon and have gamers all around you and stop by and say, "What is that?" And we got a lot of action to people that were sitting by and saying, I didn't know that existed. I didn't even know that was a thing. Of course, everybody had seen 40K, but at that scale, we would say it was 40K at 6-bit, and everybody was like, "Oh my, is that ever awesome?" So I think there's a lot of support out there. These guys that put on this event at Adepticon were super positive about the Epic hobby, and they still sounded like there's had like lots of love for the game. He also told me that they do specialist games days like once a month in the New England area, and that they have like a tournament called the Northeastern Epic Armageddon Tournament in June, and the New England War Master Tournament in September. So clearly, if they're putting on a tournament, there's someone that's got to play it. So yeah, I think there's still pockets of resistance out there and pockets of love for Epic in general, NetEpic, Epic Armageddon, and other ones, which is interesting to see because it's been a long time since even Epic Armageddon released. Like, what was that? 2013, right? We said, or no, 2003. So that's more than a decade in that too.
Teras, I wanted to ask you something since you've been into these public conventions and whatnot. Is there a generational difference between those who favor the most recent rules as opposed to the older ones? Because I kind of get that vibe from certain groups that I belong to, but I'm not sure if that's real or not. If you go to like a convention.
Yeah, these guys. It was definite that they were Epic Armageddon fans for sure. That's for sure. And like I said before, I think there's plenty of people that have no idea that Epic was even a thing. So for sure, generational for sure. You got to remember, Peter, we're part of history now, unfortunately. But I think that there's huge generation gap.
So you're saying they tend to skew younger, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, these guys were they were younger. The group that I played was definitely younger than I. There might have been one or two guys that were about the same age, but for the most part, I think they were. I'm turning 50 this year, so I think I was.
Yeah, I'm 50. I'm 51 this year. So because like in the Facebook group, for example, that I belong to, which is like 75% people who like second edition, NetEpic, etc., they tend to be precisely that 50s, 60s kind of stuff, while those who remember probably the latest game as their introduction to Epic tend to obviously skew. I just wanted to have like a practical experience like you had, because I get emails and whatnot, but sometimes that can be a bit skewed or biased. So, but apparently my thought was probably it reflects the reality of El. If you're really old, remember second edition, and if you're not that old, you probably don't.
By all means, and I for sure I would agree with that. And as we go further back, there's even less and less. And like I said, there's people that I were stopping by and had no idea that there was official.
Wow, that makes you feel old, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's official 6mm 40K miniatures in existence. People had no idea.
Yeah, we do see a similar thing in the UK. There is a very vibrant community for Epic Armageddon out there, and they do have tournaments. I think there's sort of 2 or 3 fairly sizable tournaments, about 40, 50 players getting together sort of once or twice a year, and they're playing that. And it's quite strange if I go down my local gaming club and I mention Epic, everybody, because the majority of players are late 20s, early 30s, they all know Epic Armageddon, and that's all they really know. And they sort of, they talk about having it when they were kids. Some of them still play it. And when I mention that I'm playing NetEpic or second edition, they're like, "Well, why are you playing that? Why don't you play play Armageddon?" It's like, well, I want to play a bigger game. Okay. I think it'd be good to actually move on a little bit because time is obviously catching up with us. So let's chat about the influence of Epic. And this is specifically why we've got Ken on. So I'm going to make a big sweeping statement, and Ken's going to tell me why I'm wrong. So, Ken, would you say that, I mean, you've written Polyversal, which is coming out this year, and I'm very excited by it. Would you say that that was influenced by the games you were playing of Space Marine and the Clicks games you were playing as well back in the day? Or have I got the completely wrong end of the stick there?
No, absolutely. In fact, it was interesting. I think Peter said earlier that NetEpic exists because Epic 40K came out. And frankly, Polyversal probably exists for the same reason. It just took me a lot longer because I'm only one person. And I didn't think to, corral the entire internet to help me write it. The reason, I mean, for me, my gaming experience when I was really active as a teenager was Space Marine. That's what my group played, and I was the chief evangelist for it. And, I was at that age when, although I've heard people say everyone thinks the golden age of Games Workshop is when they were a teenager, but in my case, it was when Epic 2nd Edition came out, Blood Bowl came out, the third, the good box set of Blood Bowl came out, Man of War came out, all of the good specialist games came out when I was in the height of my free time in life when I could play games a lot. And so Epic was the heart of my gaming experience for several years, and then Epic 40K came out, and I remember reading it and being really excited and thinking, oh, great, they're going to support the game in this new way. And I read the rules, and I went, this is a really cool game. It's just not Epic as I know it. It's not the game that I wanted, I think Peter said earlier. It is a good game. It's just not the game we were expecting. And that was the beginning of my sort of search for the next thing to play, really, because I realized that wasn't going to be it for me. And I kept playing 2nd Edition and in fact started playing NetEpic a few years later with some friends who were also fans of 2nd Edition. But, I tried BattleTech, I tried Silent Death, I played a bunch of other similar kinds of games that I've never been into the skirmish stuff because like you guys, I sort of like the idea of a big war on the table instead of just a couple of guys fighting over, a room. I want entire armies fighting over cities because that's just cool. And maybe because I'm a megalomaniac or something. I don't know. I'm sure it says something about my psychology, but
that's okay. Well, you're in good company. No problem.
Yeah, I mean, clearly. I feel better. Just listening to Peter makes me feel better about my own collecting habits.
Yes, I'm the guy that makes everybody else feel sane.
Yeah, thank you for that. But yeah, Polyversal, because what it really does, and I said this on the show before, Polyversal is the rules I wrote so that I could use my miniatures collection that I accumulated after I stopped playing Epic mostly. So it allows me to play 6mm, or allows you soon to play 6mm warfare with anything you have. You can play the Imperium versus the Rebellion from Star Wars if you want. You could play the BattleTech figures versus the Eldar if you want. You could mix and match them all, which I've done, and my collection's starting to merge into this weird. I have armies painted in similar colors, but with miniatures from 6 or 7 different manufacturers. And in fact, the box set is going to be that. So it took some of the spirit of what Peter was talking about, as far as having a game where you have all of these armies available and sort of combining it all in one place. And I took mechanics. I mean, mechanics-wise, it's heavily influenced by Space Marine. It's heavily influenced from 2nd Edition. It has alternating activations. It has orders counters. It's going to have little hexagonal tiles, which admittedly is stolen from Hive War, the expansion from 2nd Edition. But it's also going to have some things that are, admittedly stolen from other places, or at least modified from other places. I think inspired is the right word. It's, what game designer doesn't take inspiration from other game designs? That's how it works, frankly. But heavily, very heavily from Space Marine, because I think a part of what makes Space Marine such a great piece of gaming history at this point is that it really did incorporate the broader universe of 40K in all of its amazing just the full spectacle of it is in one place. I mean, they're still coming out with things for 40K now. Like a few years ago, remember, they came out with the Knights in 28mm scale, which are super cool models. And everyone was all excited they were going to have Knights. And I was like, I had those 20 years ago, and I had 50 of them. You know, like,
that's right.
They're still trying to catch up. I mean, they haven't even begun to make half of the vehicles that came out from Epic.
Well, I kind of feel 40K is trying to play Epic, but in 28mm.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Epic Armageddon. I mean, 40K. What was it called? Apocalypse.
Apocalypse, yeah.
If you ever read the rules for that, it's basically a sort of stripped down version of Epic, but played with 28mm miniatures. It's a little more complex in ways, but that's what they were trying to do, I think. But Polyversal is definitely inspired heavily by Space Marine because, as you said, Teras, when we play it at conventions, because I was running it as a test, that's how I got picked up by a publisher, was I was just running it for fun. And before that, I was running games of Dirtside 2, which is also a generic 6mm game.
Oh, my favorite non-GW game.
Well, this is, that was another heavy influence. But if you set up a game of any 6mm sci-fi at a convention, you draw all kinds of people to your table because they're all either my age and older, which means they're like, oh, I remember that miniature, or oh, I have some of those in a box somewhere and I never used them. What is this? Or you have younger people who are used to 40K, or they've played, they've seen movies with some of the miniatures we've got in them, or they recognize the Matchbox figures that we've painted to fit in with the armies. And they're like, oh, wow, that's really cool. I didn't realize you could put all that together. And I say to them, well, you don't need Games Workshop to tell you which miniatures you're allowed to use or not, right? I mean, you can play whatever you want.
GW's going to send the hit squad to your house now. Be careful.
But, that's why I'm making my own game, right? I'm not going to tell people I don't care. They could use bricks for all I care. They could just write on the names of them what they are. I mean, it does not matter to me. If you have something in your collection you like, if you have a bunch of Godzilla miniatures you got out of a, vending machine, use those. I don't care. That's what gaming to me should be about. I mean, and one of the cool things about the forums and the internet, and certainly the way the internet has taken off has really helped this, because you go into Tactical Command, for example, and I'm sure Primark is probably an example of this, but there are plenty of other people who have miniatures that sort of began life as 40K miniatures or as Epic miniatures, but have been grafted onto with all kinds of amazing creative things to the point where they're not really technically, they don't fit in the universe they were started from. They're not canon miniatures that are right out of the box from GW, but they're amazing. And they really, Titans with 6 arms and tentacles and, all kinds of weird things grafted onto them. And, I love, hobbyists love to, try to ID where all the model kit parts came from.
Exactly.
That's made it onto. But why shouldn't there be a game that lets you do that? I mean, you don't.
I mean, this does bring us on to a bit of a wider subject of 6mm sci-fi gaming, and there's been some fantastic games which have come out. I mean, obviously, I'm really looking forward to Polyversal. I love what you've done with that idea, Ken, and the fact that you're producing a box set which has miniatures from 6 different manufacturers.
Yeah.
All together. That's just a fantastic concept. But there's other great games out there, aren't there? I mean, we mentioned Dirtside, and Neil, you played Dirtside quite a bit, haven't you?
I tended to play more Stargrunt than Dirtside, but I certainly played a little bit of Dirtside. And yeah, as again, same as Peter, it is a fantastic system,
great. It's great.
And interestingly, I was just looking at when the original Dirtside, because most people know Dirtside from Dirtside 2, and the original Dirtside came out the same year as Space Marine.
Yep, yeah. It's really old.
Yep. Yeah, which is something I never read. I mean, Dirtside 2 is 1993.
Exactly.
Right. And it's not been revised since, but it still holds up. Which just, it's the same as Stargrunt 2. It just goes to show how good a game system that John Tuffley wrote back in, back 25 years ago.
It's held up the test of time, that's for sure. And there's been a lot of modifications to it, some good, not so good, but yeah, it's a great core system.
It's available to download for free. If anybody wants Dirtside 2, it's on the GZG website.
Yep.
Download it for free with all the
counters.
All the counters, all the expansions, everything. It's all there. It's a great system.
I think another good system is a Future War Commander. I really like that one too.
That's really interesting system, especially in the sense of, okay, it came out, 2008 that one came out. And that's really interesting in the fact of, it's almost like Future War Commander obviously comes out of
Blitzkrieg Commander, right?
Which is basically World War II War Master.
Yeah.
So it's quite a bizarre thing of the game. I suppose Future War Commander came out at the point where GW were no longer officially supporting Epic.
Right.
People were wanting to. Thinking, okay, what do I use my Epic armies for? And they renamed everything to get around the IP.
Right.
But your Epic armies were in Future War Commander, just under another name.
Yeah, there's a download that actually tells you what all the.
Yes, that's correct. Right.
Yes, there is.
I just wrote them all in with a pen.
Yeah. That whole thing of what you're doing here is basically taking one GW army and playing an amended system, but which had its foundation again in a GW game. And in some ways, that's almost a bizarre concept, isn't it? Because but again, you have this whole issue of just because the game is no longer officially supported by the people who produce it, why do you need to stop playing it, or why do you need to find alternative rules in order to play? And this is something that goes beyond the scope of just Epic. It seems to be a thing that pervades the entire hobby.
Yes.
But it is. But again, I think that's one reason why something like Future War Commander did what it did. Because people were going, well, what do I play now? Okay, here's another set of rules.
Yeah, but if you play Blitzkrieg Commander, like I play with a buddy of mine, Tom, and the game's awesome. The mechanics are incredible. But if you're an Epic player and you play Blitzkrieg Commander, you automatically say, I would think, okay, how do we do this in sci-fi? Like that's the type of game it is. It's just such a great system that you automatically say, how do I get Space Marines into this game?
That's what I thought when I bought Blitzkrieg Commander.
Yeah,
exactly.
Oh yeah. I'd say. I mean, that was the great thing about Future War Commander, and the fact that at the end of the day, what it basically did. We just talked about Dirtside. It basically went through all the small scale miniatures currently on the market on the time when it was produced, and then said, right, okay, you've got this army. Well, okay, that fits into this army list, and you can play this game with it. They were very, very clever in what they did.
Yeah. All right, let me ask a question, right? And this could be the one that sort of finishes off this sort of part. So there is a lot of love out there for Epic. I mean, I put some pictures up on Twitter, and so has Ken recently, and there's been a massive amount of people just sort of going, "Oh, this reminds me of my childhood. This is so great. I really want to play this again." But was the charm of Epic, and was the beauty of Epic, the rules, or was it the fluff? Was it the fact that you were playing a massive battle game in the Games Workshop universe?
That one.
Oh, can I?
Yeah. Go for it, Ken.
So here's what I think the answer to that is. I think the answer is both of those things, but because they were integrated correctly. The thing that Epic Second Edition got right, in my opinion, is that the orcs, for example, are insane. They are orcs. Yes. The rules are built in. They're nuts. They have weapons like the pulsar rocket, for example. There's a rule for the pulsar rocket where you have to guesstimate how many dice you want to roll for how far it's going to go, because they can never get the same amount of gasoline into it or whatever they use to power it. So you just have to figure out how far you think you want it to go and roll dice, and it'll land somewhere near there. And that rule is very simple. It's it's on the page with the unit. And you do that, and suddenly your friends are joking around about, you can easily picture the crazy orcs trying to hammer the thing together to make it work. And it doesn't make any rational sense. And then when they went to this is just a discrete example of that. When they went to Epic 40K, the rules after that, it became a generic super weapon. It was just a bomb, right? And it moved 28 inches and it exploded or whatever. I don't even know what it was for that in particular, but it took away all of the flavor. And I think what the game, it did that really well. And it had, and what I loved about it in particular was the army cards let you set up an army. Like you could play around with picking an army by just dealing cards out on it. You can lay out all these cards on a table and you could get a sense of what you had, as opposed to trying to do it all in a notebook and add, flip to the back of the book and see how many special weapons you add, and then flip to the front and, go back to your army list and all that. It was all just right in front of you in a set of cards, which I personally thought was great. I realize that might be a little dated. Some people don't like that because you need another place to put all those cards. But to me, the key was, aside from the fact that this is assuming the already fleshed out world of 40K, which by then was mostly fleshed out. It was just enormous. They really filled it all in, and it was like no holds barred. They came up with every crazy vehicle they wanted to and did it. And I think they got that right because they integrated the rules into the fluff perfectly.
That's a great explanation, Ken. And that's the one thing I've tried to explain to people, because a lot of people don't like the rules. Oh, they're clunky, they're too detailed, but that's the reason I've been with this game for almost 30 years, and I collect it so heavily as you do. I always tell people I like that rule set because it represented what the background was in a mechanical form. The later versions just looks like, what's the difference for me playing those, like, Epic Armageddon or Epic 40K, than playing Future War Commander, and playing Dirt Side 2? Those rules that don't have specific rules for, like, my crazy orcs or my ravenous tyrannids or my mutated chaos people. That's the reason that rule set has stood the test of time, because it takes the universe and it recreates it mechanically on the battlefield. It's just not. It's something beyond the just putting the soldiers down and having a battle. The most memorable things of my games that I can remember are things like Ken said. Oh, remember that day that the Weird Boy Tower exploded and it took half your clan and you lost the game in the first turn?
Right. Yes, I do.
Exactly, and so do I.
I've never played with you, but I remember doing that.
So it's stuff like that you cannot recreate that easily in just any rule set. It's stuff like that which is mechanically simple, but is so flavorful that you may forget the game and who you played it with, but you remember what you rolled and what happened afterwards.
So, Ken, what you think?
Yeah, I'd love to go next. First, thank you, Ken. That was awesome, to tell you the truth. That was exactly succinct and to the T. That game, if you wanted to play 40K, if you wanted to play in the 40K universe, that game you did. You were in it. Right? For the orcs were the orcs, the Eldar were the Eldar. They played like each other, as the fluff should be. Also, I'd like to add a little bit on scale, because I've been thinking a lot about scale after I read Osprey's Dragon Rampant. And there's a little bit of about scale in that book that really got me thinking. Like, all these bases are the same size. Like, if you get a square base, a square square epic base, it's similar in size to a 28 millimeter base. And so you're still moving pieces of, relatively about the same distance across the table, doing line of sight. Some rules might have ranges differently, but there's ranges that are different in 40K too. So really, what's interesting about 6 millimeter and about this playing in this universe, the GW 40K universe at 6 millimeter, is that it tricks the eye. It really does feel like you're moving huge masses of people across the table. It feels like your jet bikes are screaming across the table and making a flanking move. It feels like Titans are walking step by step across the table. And that's what Epic is about. Like, this is huge movements of things across this exact 6x4 table you play on all the time. But you, at 6 millimeter, it tricks the eye into thinking that you are playing a massive game. And that is what is great about Epic. When you also mentioned 40K style big games like Apocalypse, the rules for that in 2nd edition Titan Legion had it so it was functional. You can actually get through a game in 3 or 4 hours. And sometimes you like push it to the max. Okay, you know what? I just painted 10,000 more guys. Let's make it 10,000 more. You know, every time I brought more, it would be a longer game, but it was manageable in a day. You can't play Apocalypse in a day. And it was a stunning amount of coolness on the table, and just vastness of the vastness of the scale also encompasses the vastness of the 40K universe.
Beautifully put, gentlemen. Beautifully put. Okay. There is one more subject I want to cover, but before we get to that, I want to quite quickly just cover a couple of little quick things. If there's anyone out there who hasn't played Epic, but is now chomping at the bit to actually play it, Mr. Shook, where would be the best place to get the rules and support? Is it, obviously we've got the NetEpic.org site, which obviously Peter's been pushing, and I can hardly recommend that.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. www.netepic.org, and you'll find everything you need there.
Yeah, we are going to put all these links in the show notes. So if you want to play NetEpic, go to the site. Everything is free. Go and grab it. You can go to the NetEpic, the Net Armageddon site, which is www.net-armageddon.org, and you can get the rules on there if you want to play Armageddon. There is a fantastic forum called the Attack Command Forum, which just covers sci-fi gaming in 6mm, and all of the rules that you want to play are listed on there with their own forums. It's a brilliant place. Get on there, have a look around. So we've discussed, you know, where we're going to get the rules from. NetEpic.org, go and get them. They're free. Figures. Now,
do GW's lawyers listen to this podcast?
Everybody listens to this podcast, Ken. You know that.
Fair enough.
So we can't buy them off you. We can't buy them off Peter.
Oh yeah. I can sell you some.
That's the first commandment for me. I buy. I don't sell.
I wasn't trying to be. I mean, I actually, having been an IP lawyer, I can tell you, and having purchased and been aware of what turned out to be recast versions of GW miniatures, unaware. There are people. I mean, obviously, if you want Games Workshop miniatures, they exist. I mean, eBay. There's plenty of people who have, like, maybe not as much as Peter, lots of Epic miniatures, and every day on eBay somebody decides they're getting to clean out their closet and they put them up there, and actually there's almost everything shows up there sooner or later. There's some Facebook groups. If you really are dead set on actual Games Workshop miniatures, you should get them. I mean, there are people who recast them though, and obviously GW.
So is there a market for that?
Well,
like, I've got some. I've got my old miniatures, and I'm like, I wonder. You know what? If
you mean
if
to sell your own?
Yeah, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's a market for that. It kind of depends nowadays what era of models you want. The Epic Armageddon era ones, since they are very nice, I'll give them that. Tend to be more highly sought after than like the really old Space Marine AT era stuff. If it's not some kind of special variant, like Titan weapon variants, for example, which are old as dirt, like the game, those are sought after, especially certain variants. But like an old Rhino or old Land Raider or Predator or Lehman Russ, that's not going to go so far.
No. Well, you know what? If we're worried about this segment, and you know what, I think it might take away from the rest ones, especially if we start to talk about Hawk games and Spartan games, because you can get those miniatures, and it would actually take away from Ken. I think that I think I'd rather, if everybody would be into it, I'd rather say who's going to be into buying the future release of Epic.
That was going to be my next question, so I think we'll cover that. So let's skip over figures.
That's fair. But to be fair, there are many, and actually, not that I disagree with Teras, but I don't think you should I think anyone listening to this should know there are many very good 6mm sci-fi miniatures manufacturers who are doing a totally legal, they're making their own flavored versions of things that would easily count as they're clearly very similar to things GW made.
Yeah, I mean,
but they're not illegal. There's nothing wrong with that. And like Onslaught miniatures, for example, or just like Mantic makes fantasy miniatures that are clearly designed to be Warhammer miniatures, but aren't. And now they've obviously moved on to Kings of War. But people do that. They're like Onslaught miniatures, for example, is an excellent example. They make extraordinary 6mm miniatures, many of which look frighteningly close enough to Dark Eldar or Tau or other of the races that GW never bothered to make, or if they did, they only made them through Forge World in limited quantities at great expense, that you can get from Onslaught, and they're wonderful, and you can call them whatever you want.
I think this is like a golden age as far as that's concerned. I mean, you go back in the day, either it was GW or nothing, basically. I mean, now there's a lot of good choices out there.
Which is why we have 5 or 6 manufacturers for Polyversal, just to get that plug in one more time. But they're out there. That's why we're doing it.
I mean, there are places to legitimately get your Epic proxy, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay, so I think it is fair to say that there is a thriving market for the official Games Workshop figures on various auction sites. But be careful. Some people are doing recasting.
Yeah, I'm pretty well versed in this topic without getting into the details and whatnot. I would just recommend people, when you go, you really shouldn't be paying a lot of money off of eBay for basically anything. Why? Because reproductions are such a high quality that unless you know how to use a pair of calipers, you will not know the difference.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was quite lucky. I bought an Eldar army for about £35.
That's a good deal.
That was a good deal, and I looked at it, and you can tell on eBay if somebody's got if they look dusty and old and chipped, they're going to be originals. If they look nice and shiny and lovely, they might possibly be recasts. So
that never-ending supply of Forge World resin coming out of East Europe.
Yeah, I have a whole lot of Forge World that sort of seems not quite right. I also got a suspicious several Ordinatuses, or Ordinati, is that the plural, whatever, which are fairly rare Epic models, and they were recast. They weren't filled in. There were details. But one thing you can do on eBay is if you look at the history of the seller, if they've sold 100 metal Titan bits, like. And they're all the same one. The photographs the same. They probably didn't. I mean, unless they're Peter, they probably don't have 100 of the same very rare Titan part lying around.
Hey, to be absolutely fair, not even that applies to me because I stopped asking that question 20 years ago when I buy stuff. If it looks good, I'll take it.
Yeah, but moving away from the Games Workshop, there are some fantastic figure manufacturers out there.
Yeah, this is just a great time to do 6mm. There's just so many good ones out there that you don't have to limit yourself on them. I think it bears saying to like anybody listening to the podcast that don't anchor yourself to just one thing. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff out there, and just because it might not have exact look, it doesn't mean it's not worthy of your attention. There's good quality cast and design out there in 6mm. It just bears you taking the time to take a look at it. It's just a nice time to be a 6mm gamer.
Yeah, it is. There's some fantastic stuff. So, I mean, I will give a shout out to Vanguard Miniatures and to Onslaught Miniatures, who make some great figures. And they are not Games Workshop figures. They may have a similarity to some of the design ethos of some of the figures, possibly, and you could maybe get away with using them in your games. But I look at them and think those are just fantastic miniatures. And I would use them in my game.
A lot of the stuff coming out now from those two that you mentioned are better than the original Games Workshop stuff. I mean, I don't know where the protests come from. I'm like, really? Just look at some of those early casts from GW. I mean, even a half-assed recast can do better than that in modern times. Yeah. So just look at the quality of what's coming out there. I mean, you won't be disappointed. It's good stuff.
Yeah. Okay,
But
so this
that does fairly bring us around to Teras's question, which is, have you seen the new stuff they're making?
well, this is the
that
thing.
question.
So the circle, some would say, is complete. So in 1988, Adeptus Titanicus came out with 6 Warlord Titans in this wonderful 6mm scale. And I'm going to go to Teras for this because he probably knows the gossip. But there is a very strong hint that Adeptus Titanicus is being re-released by Games Workshop in 8mm. And discuss, gentlemen.
Ha! Let me. Oh, just for the record, because they've already acknowledged it on TACCOMs, I was saying that they were going to change the scale in the re-release for many years. Yeah. So you heard it first from me, people, for years and years and years.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody really knows the scale yet. I've heard 9mm, actually, to tell you the truth. So I don't know if anybody really knows the scale for sure. It will be bigger. I think GW is trying to make Warlord Titans the exact same size as their, and maybe even using the same chassis as their Knights. So that's how big Warlord Titan would be.
Whoa.
That's what I've.
No, that's way more than 9mm.
Yeah.
My original prognostication was they were going to do it in 10 to 15mm.
Yeah, that'd be like 15.
Now, I don't know if that's true. Okay, so anything I say is complete rumors. There's absolutely no link between me and GW. I do not know anything that's actually happened. But this is one of the rumors that I've heard. I've heard 2018, summer of 2018. I've heard that they might delay it until they release it at the same time as the Horus Heresy books will round up or down or end, I guess, is the thing at the battle of Teras. So there's lots of rumors out there going, and I think, as a matter of fact, one of the last Forge World days, they were using the new rules in one of their demonstrations. So it's not. I think it's gone far enough to say that it is going to happen. What the exact format of that is going to be, I'm not sure.
I think one thing that's been consistent is that it's just going to be a Titan game. So don't expect the revamp of the whole thing with infantry and vehicles and all that stuff. It's just a Titan game.
At first.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I don't think the Games Workshop have got the appetite to re-release the whole Epic range.
Oh, totally agree. I've said this for years. It's never going to happen. Once they destroyed the old molds, that was it for that idea. Anything new will be a self-contained game with relatively few expansions.
Yeah, I think that's right. So, I mean, it'll be interesting. I would definitely pick it up when it comes out, just because, who wouldn't?
I would actually argue that it all depends on sales. GW is pretty sales-oriented. I think that if it does well, and I actually think it will do well, especially if they release it at the same time as the ending of the Horus Heresy series. I don't know if you guys follow 40K and that type of thing, but 30K is in its heyday right now. People are playing the Heresy almost more than 40K, or there's certainly a huge amount of energy behind 30K. Probably it's not the same as 40K in volume of sales, but certainly I think the GW is not turning a blind eye to what's happening with 30K this year. I mean, at this time.
I'm sort of thinking if it does well, it'll be just more Titan expansions. I mean, I really doubt they're going to go down the road of, old Epic with all the infantry and whatnot. So it kind of sounds like to me, if it does well, then they'll put out Reavers or Warlords or Eldar Titans or Gargants. I could definitely see that happening, but
I don't know. I it'll be interesting to see. I can't see it not moving into infantry though. I really can't. I mean, if assuming it expands, like if it just comes out as a box set and that's it, that's the end, I can see it. But if it does expand, people will be clamoring for infantry. They'll want to create the Horus Heresy experience. No matter what the rules are.
I think the thing that Games Workshop have done, and I think it's a genius idea, is by basing it in in 30k universe, in the Heresy universe, they can quite easily just do Marine armies. They can just be, because the Chaos armies or the Heresy side armies, they look like Space Marines anyway. So they could just do a Space Marine, Land Raiders, Rhinos, a couple of the small variants, and say
that's true.
That's it. They don't have to go into open up the Pandora's box of Orcs and Eldar and everything else.
That would make it kind of boring, though.
But isn't that why it started? I mean, it started that way because they could make Space Marine Titans, and they could just paint some of them red and call them Chaos Titans, and that was, it's just cheaper that way.
Yeah.
It's interesting in the fact of if that is what they're going to do, it takes the game right back to its roots.
Yes.
Mm. Yeah. The circle starts again.
I think it's not going to do well because I'm not going to be buying it. And that's a huge negative for any company, me not buying.
Well, actually, it says here, this is what it says. So I think there's on Bella Lost Souls, I said, let's go see what Bella Lost Souls has to say. Yeah, and they're not always right either. So just keep that in mind. But they're certainly as good a source as any. And it says, talking to Andy Hoare, Mark Bedford, and Chris Drew, they mentioned, or it was mentioned anyway, that the scale will be 8 millimeter. A Warlord will be about 6 inches tall. The models will be produced in resin by Forge World. I don't know if that's true or not. Actually, that's not true because I think that the box set's going to be coming in plastic anyway. The box set is rumored to be 2 Warlords and 2 Reavers and 2 or 3 Warhounds. Again, this is all rumor, so don't quote me on any of this. More Titan variants are possible in the future, and down the road, infantry and tanks will be introduced. Other races are also possible.
Yeah,
but I think
it's as they say, anything's possible.
Right. Yeah, well, that's exactly it.
It's just not probable.
Oh, and it also says, did I say that the Warlord will be about 6 inches tall?
Yeah.
So is not definitely not what I said earlier. So.
Yeah, I've seen the picture of the prototype and whatnot. It's big though, dude. It's even bigger than the True Scale Titans that are branded out.
It looks like it's bigger than a 40k Dreadnought, maybe in that territory, but not a Knight.
Yeah, that's right. Well, maybe that's what it was. Maybe I was mistaken.
I'd say maybe a Venerable Dreadnought size thing.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Like a Forge World Titan, the 30k Forge World Titan. 30k Forge World Dreadnought. Whatever it's called, I forget what it's called now.
Cool.
Oh yeah.
So
so I'm not. I am personally not discounting troops, but it'll be interesting to see what the future is going to be.
Well, let's see what happens.
I will most likely buy it and get into it. I'm kind of out of 40k now. I've decided to kind of move on from 40k, but I think that I will move back into Epic via this way. I think it's a cool and neat new version. I don't know about the rules, what the rules will be. I mean, that'll be obviously the
supposedly they're going back to they're basing it on first edition rules, which in my book is a plus.
Yeah.
No? Well, then I think inevitably I'd probably go back to it, especially because in my opinion, after just getting my miniatures out and playing with them again, I think they feel dated to me. And that a new Warlord at 6 inches at their new way of 3D printing and 3D modeling is going to be spectacular.
Yeah, I'm just worried it's going to be like $150 a piece.
Oh, wow. At least.
Well, the price is really exactly. I mean, that's always going to be an issue too, right?
I'll probably get the set for historical purposes, but I doubt I'll ever play it besides reading the rules.
Just for research purposes, Peter, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I actually have all the original boxes for that purpose, because a lot of people ask these questions. What's on the side of this box, or do you have the content description? I actually have all this on PhotoBucket, actually, because somebody asked me what the contents of the boxes from second edition era were, token card wise, and I actually have pristine copies of all those unpunched, and I just took pictures of all of them and put them on PhotoBucket. Okay, here you are. This is what the box brought. So I like having anything that comes out, even though I don't use it, but just because I know 10, 15 years now, somebody's going to be asking, oh, you remember that box? What came in there? Well, here you go. Here's pictures of it. This is exactly what it brought.
I have used that resource. It's actually very useful.
Okay, chaps. Well, I think we've reached a fairly natural conclusion here. The thing that's jumped out on me from this discussion, one has been fantastic just to talk about the old game. But the biggest thing is the fact that games don't have to die just because manufacturers stop producing them.
No, they're alive as long as somebody still wants to play with somebody else.
Yeah, and that is the biggest thing. So I would like to thank all three of you. So Mr. Whitehurst, thank you very much for coming on, and good luck with Polyversal. Really looking forward to seeing that come out.
Yeah, good luck. That's very super cool.
Yep, thank you. Pre-orders are still, open on Colin's Epic Wargames website. We are, just a quick update, we are most of the miniatures have been cast and sent to us. Not quite all of the manufacturers are done, but we've got most of them in. The dice are all in. The art is mostly in. The rules I'm done with them, but they're being edited. Then we hope to get them out to the backers sometime soon. At least to look at, and then we'll put them in layout, assuming there's not just a giant outcry to change them. And then we should be, Byron says he wants to be able to get it out in the second quarter of this year. This year. So sometime in the next 3 months, I hope.
Cool. That'd be good. Okay. Mr. Cassidy, sir, thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure talking to you again.
You're more than welcome. It's always awesome to come on this podcast. One of my favorite podcasts, of course, and it's always a pleasure to hang out with you guys for a little while. Can't wait to see you in the fall.
Yeah, it'd be good to meet up. And Mr. Ramos, it has been an absolute pleasure to speak to you, sir. Thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, it's the first time I do it. It was highly enjoyable. I got to talk about things I rarely get to talk about anymore, and I would certainly come on again for this or any other topic. So, very, very, very entertaining. Thank you very much.
I'm sure we can find a reason to get you back on. Don't worry. It depends if Neil lets me.
Oh yes, no problem at all there.
Yeah. And on that note, I will pass you back to your normal podcast host. This is the Mike Hobbs podcast signing off, and back over to Meeples and Miniatures.
The nation is vast. There are battlefields of old, great convention halls, and worlds of fantasy to explore. Who will guide us across this great geek nation?
Since 2010, Geek Nation Tours have been providing holidays for groups of like-minded people. Whatever your nature of geek, tabletop gaming, TV, film, comic books, sports or science, Geek Nation Tours caters for you. Visit www.geeknationtours.com for more details and join the great Geek Nation. We hope that you're enjoying this episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you are, would you like to support us? There's a couple of ways of doing so. You can become a patron of the show by supporting us on our Patreon page. There you can give regularly every time we produce a show. Alternatively, you may want to give a one-off donation, and you can do that by using PayPal. For more details on both these options, please click on the Donate tab on our website www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. there we have it. Something of a different show, but I hope you enjoyed it. As I said during the main part of the show, Epic was something that I almost got into. I bought a heck of a lot of, and then ended up selling it while never playing it, which is kind of the story of my life with half of the stuff I ended up doing with GW. All I can say was that it seemed like a good idea at the time. Obviously, X number of years later, I kind of regret that maybe, I was too soon. I was preemptive in getting rid of my Epic collection. But hindsight, as always, is a wonderful thing. Well, I hope you enjoyed that show. And all that remains to be said is thank you one and all for listening. We will be back next week, all being well. Next week, we will have a plethora of interviews that we will have recorded at Salute. Okay, so we are at the Salute show this weekend, which is the 22nd of April. If you've managed to download and listen to this before the 22nd, as we mentioned in the last show, myself and the Luftmeister himself will be wandering around the show all day. So please feel free to come along and say hi. We'd love to chat. All being well, the results of our labours from Salute will be up for your listening pleasure the following week. So until next time, take care everybody, happy gaming, and we will speak to you live from Salute next week. Thank you for listening to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, why not share it with others by leaving us a review on iTunes? And if you have any comments or questions, you can always email the show. The address is info@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. And you can also visit our webpage, where you'll find a complete episode archive, all the View from the Veranda podcasts, rules reviews, and our blog of hobby items and news, which is updated several times a week. This is also where you'll find the links to our presence on social media, and here you can follow us on Twitter or join our Facebook group. And finally, here you can also find details should you wish to support us by making a donation to the podcast. All this on the Meeples and Miniatures website, www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 3.0 Unported license. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.